In today's episode, we have some very strange, unusual, and paranormal experiences to share with you. Everything from terrifying camping situations to seeing something otherworldly in the water while two boys were fishing. Let's get into it. My name is Sarah, and I'm an avid outdoors enthusiast. I love hiking, camping, and anything else that gets me close to nature. I currently live east of San Francisco in the Bay Area of California, and I'm used to seeing all kinds of wildlife. So a few weeks ago, I went camping with my boyfriend at a place called Del Valle Regional Park. It's about 45 minutes away from where we live, so it's easy to spend time there, and being there gets us out and closer to nature. We decided to go camping and were looking forward to it because it was easy to get to, and it had everything there. Everything we needed to be comfortable, like showers, bathrooms, etc. And the park is huge. There are tons of trails that stretch for miles and miles through the hills and valleys, so even though you're surrounded by people, you can easily get lost if you choose one of the many available paths. So, we arrived at the park on a Saturday morning, and we set up camp on one of the more secluded areas of the park. Our campsite was near a small creek that fed into the lake. It was pretty, but we didn't spend too much time there because we wanted to explore the trails, move our legs, and get some exercise. So we headed out right away, and we took a long hike along one of the trails until we were deep into the trees. We were just walking, enjoying the fresh air and the nature around us. After a while, we came to a small clearing in the trees. It was an open area with plenty of sunlight and fresh air flowing through it. I could tell that this spot had been used as a campsite before because there were ashes from a fire pit and some other signs that someone had been there before. We continued our walk along, taking some time to relax in the clearing for a while. And after about another half hour or so of hiking, we came to another clearing, very similar to the first one we'd come across earlier. And again, I noticed all the signs that showed that someone had been there before, ashes from a fire pit, etc. And that's when something caught my eye up high in one of the trees at this second clearing. It looked at first like a piece of fabric hanging from one of the trees. I thought it was weird, but my boyfriend and I just kept walking. As we did, I glanced over at the tree again, and I saw what thought was the fabric on the tree, but it was not fabric at all. It took me a few seconds to realize exactly what I was looking at, but when it hit me, I stopped dead in my tracks, making my boyfriend stop as well. "What's wrong?" he said. "Look up there," I said, pointing to the moving object on the tree. "Oh shit," he said, after taking a closer look at it. It was a dead animal, hanging from the tree. Its skin had been removed, and it looked like it had been gutted. But that wasn't what freaked me out. My heart started racing, and chills ran up and down my spine. Next to the first dead animal was a dead rabbit, hanging from the same tree. And next to that was a dead squirrel, and so on. There were at least 10 carcasses hanging in the tree. It looked like something had killed all of these animals and strung them up on the tree, leaving their carcasses to rot. "What is this?" I asked my boyfriend as we stood there looking at this horrifying display of death. "I don't know," he said, "but let's get out of here." "Yeah," I said in agreement. We turned around and started walking back through the clearing, but before we'd gone more than a few steps, something caught my eye in the bushes near where we had been. At first, I thought it was just a shadow, but then I realized it was moving. I couldn't see what it was at first, but whatever it was, I could tell it was big, and it was coming towards us. I grabbed my boyfriend's arm, we started to run out of the clearing and back onto the trail, but before we could make it to safety, something came crashing through the bushes after us. It was fast, whatever it was, and it was headed straight for us. We ran as fast as we could, but whatever was chasing us was gaining on us quickly. I glanced over my shoulder and saw something that looked like a hairy, human-like creature running after us on 2 legs. But before I could get a better look at it, it was upon us. It tackled my boyfriend, and he went down hard, hitting his head on a rock. I tried to run too, but it was too fast. It caught me and threw me to the ground. I hit my head as well, and everything went black. The next thing I remember is waking up in a hospital bed. My boyfriend and I were both in there, with concussions and some other injuries, but we were going to be all right. As for what chased us and attacked us in the woods, the authorities never did find it, but based on the descriptions we gave them, they actually believe that it was some sort of a Bigfoot creature, or Sasquatch. I couldn't believe they actually admitted it. I haven't been back to that park since then, and I never will, and I would advise anyone else who goes there to be on the lookout for anything strange, because you never know what might be lurking in the woods, ready to pounce. It was June of 2015, and I was out on Lake Weremog in Connecticut camping with my boyfriend. We had decided to lay out under the stars the first night there because the weather was so perfect. It started out being quite a romantic trip, and we had dinner right there next to the water. After our last swim, we laid out on towels and eventually fell asleep, just like this, tired from spending the evening swimming. And then around 2 o'clock in the morning, I woke up to use the bathroom. The restrooms were not too far from our camp, so I decided not to wake my boyfriend. I would just walk over there by myself and use the bathroom using the moonlight. I did also bring my cell phone, too, for extra light. And then when I got to the bathrooms, which were basically just a small building with 2 doors, I noticed something was moving around behind them. At first, I just told myself it would have been a small animal, so I went about my business. But outside, I could still hear some rustling, and I kept trying to ignore it so I wouldn't freak myself out. When I finished and opened the door, I saw a small girl, maybe 6 or 7 years old, wearing a blue dress, standing outside the building. Just standing there, staring at me, like she was waiting for me to say something or do something. I wondered if she needed help. When I first saw her, I was also kind of freaked out that she was alone, but I figured she was just there with her parents and needed to use the bathroom, so came over alone. I asked her if she needed help back to camp. She put her finger over her lips and whispered the strangest thing. "Only speak when spoken to." She then put her hand back behind her and pulled out what looked like a rope, and that was totally confusing to me. The girl then started walking towards me, and I started getting freaked out. I froze right there as she reached out her hand to hold me the rope, and when I put my hand out to grab it, my hand went straight through it, and I started screaming. The girl jumped back and screamed something totally inaudible, and after that she just disappeared, and the rope was gone too. I took off with the girl's words echoing in my head as I ran. "Only speak when spoken to." What did she mean by that? What did that even mean? And why did my hand go right through the rope? I didn't have time to think about it now, though. I had to get out of there. I didn't know where I was going, but I didn't care. I just had to get away from that whole place. My boyfriend must have heard me screaming because he followed me to the car and we both drove home. I never went back to that place again. I told him all about it. Neither of us have actually been back there camping again. And I don't know what was wrong with that girl, or if she was even real, or did I imagine her, but it sure did seem like she was trying to tell me something. Our next story takes place in April of 2022 in Louisiana. I've been following your site for quite a while now, and I finally have something to report about myself. It was crazy. It all happened about 3 weeks ago at Purple Heart Memorial Park in Louisiana. The pond there usually has a ton of people fishing, but this was a Wednesday morning in the spring, and a lot of kids were still at school and parents were at work. My friend and I were fishing there by ourselves, standing at the edge of the stocked pond. We had both graduated about a year ago, and we were at the point in our lives where we were trying to figure it all out and look for good jobs, but it had been rough going, and we just needed a day's break. I grew up fishing, and I knew this place well, and it was within walking distance to our houses. We were planning on going back to the job hunt the next day. We'd been fishing a few hours with no luck when all of a sudden my friend's rod bent way over. He reeled in his line and pulled out a very large catfish, but we put the catfish back in the water and continued to fish. We weren't after anything big like that, and I had always felt bad catching them. He then got a bite again and this time pulled out a small trout, and as I turned to help him get the fish off the hook, I noticed something across the water. It was submerged, but bouncing up and down, out of the water, coming out, and also coming towards us. And I could see something that looked like antlers or crooked horns poking up over the water. And I swear there were 2 eyes, black with white spots in the middle. I grabbed my friend and told him to look, but by the time he did, it went back under. He said it was probably nothing, just some sticks. I sat there a little startled, but I put my line back in the water and sat quietly as we waited for more fish to bite. Another half hour passed when my rod suddenly doubled over. My friend tried to help me pull whatever it was in, but my rod snapped in half. I had never had anything like that happen before, and I got scared, backed up from the water and scooted back. There was no way this was a catfish. My friend looked at me like I was crazy until a head, just like the one I had seen earlier, popped up out of the water. Whatever it was, it walked on the bottom of the lake, and as it came close, it revealed itself to us. It was zombie-like. White skin stretched over a skull, with tears in the flesh where the cheekbones jutted out. The skull itself was giant, with these crooked horns pointing out from its temples, and there was fur from the back of its head that traveled down to its body where it was more prevalent. Its chest and its limbs also looked skeletal underneath stretched flesh and fur. As it stood over us dripping wet, I could see long claws on its human-like hands and its feet. We stared at it. It stared back, huffing and puffing in a fury. I now could also see that my fishing hook was sticking out of its shoulder. The creature reached up, ripped it out, and threw it at me, narrowly missing my head. I got up, dropped all of my fishing gear, and started to run. My friend right behind me. We ran all the way back home without stopping. I didn't even tell my parents because I was afraid they wouldn't believe me, even though they kept asking what was wrong. I just told them that I had had a fight with my friend and was upset about it. But then I told my other friends, but they laughed at me. The 2 of us were the only ones that believed anything supernatural happened. And then the next day we went back to see if there was any proof that this thing had been there, and to also gather our fishing gear. But it wasn't there. But there were people fishing, and nothing seemed out of the ordinary. All I found was the fishing hook, with what looked like rotting flesh stuck to it. Not wanting to take it home, my friend and I accepted defeat, and we never talked about it again. The next story takes place in June of 1999. I was camping with a good friend of mine. It was 1999, and at the time we had been friends for over 20 years. We were camping at Lost Dutchman State Park in Arizona, which was a few hours from our houses, and we had been out there for a few days before it happened. We weren't camping with our children this time because we needed our own little getaway, which would work out best for us later. We had set up our tents side by side, sharing a small wall between us. We were also on the edge of the campground, so we had more trees around us. The view all around was rocks and cactus plants for a mile at least. It was late at night, around 11 o'clock at night, and we were sitting outside our tents just talking about life. We weren't feeling vulnerable or scared, even though no one else was close to us, because we knew that if anything happened or we yelled or screamed, someone would hear us. But we had let our guard down, and the first thing that brought us back to high alert was a strange sound. A loud screech like a man's voice, and then some banging. We looked over to where it was coming from. It sounded about 30 feet from us to the left. And as we were looking in that direction, that's when we both saw something that stepped out from the trees. My friend grabbed onto me, terrified that something really bad was about to happen. We could only make out the silhouette at first, something standing tall on hind legs, like some sort of animal, not on all fours, though. That was not what I was expecting to see at all. And its arms were recoiling open and closed with long claws at the ends. We couldn't make out anything else, and we were ready to run. It could have been a wolf for all we knew, but then it began walking towards us on 2 legs. We jumped up, grabbed each other, backed up into the tiny space between our tents. Tears were streaming down my face as it slowly walked towards us and into the light of our campfire. It had hair all over its body, thick like a bear's, not a dog's. But it was massive, and it stopped right in front of our tents and stared at us. To this day, I can still see into its eyes. They were almost human-like and green in color. The thing sniffed around us with its long snout. It was appearing more like a wolf now, but something about its arms and chest and the gestures it was making were so human. We held our breath. We waited to see what it would do next. But then it suddenly continued walking past our tents and right out of the campsite, as if we were just in its way. As we watched it head back into the trees on the other side of our camp, but it never turned around. It just kept walking. We stayed up all night, afraid to move or leave, and then the next morning I wanted to investigate the area it came out from, so I took a walk there alone while my friend packed up the things. And there, in the bushes, I saw something so strange. A pile of clothes. And beside the clothes was a small campsite, but it had been torn apart. There was no blood, though, or anything, but there were large scratches all along the trees. I reported to my friend what I found, but she didn't want to know anything about it. She never wanted to go over and see it either. She just wanted to get home. We never took our kids back there. She and I still don't talk about what we saw that night, even though we're still close friends, and we see each other often. I think we're just burying the memories so that we aren't terrified.